listening to the Becoming More Me podcast with me, Teresa Lear Levine. You're already enough. But if you're anything like me, you thrive when you're stretching and developing yourself, creating more of the person you feel called to be. This podcast is here to inspire and support you. Let's release the negative, reinforce the positive, and elevate our vibe together as we tap into our limitless potential to transform and grow. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Becoming More Me. I am really excited to have Judy Arazoza on the show today. Judy owns and operates Grateful Fitness, a strength program for women over 40. She's also the host of the Air Hug Community podcast, which I actually got to meet her through doing an episode on her show. And at that point, we realized that we had so much in common, from the number of kids we have to the type of dogs we have and our love of fitness, nutrition, all that kind of stuff. And I just had to bring her on the show today to share her knowledge and her story as well. Judy became a professional bodybuilder in her 50s, which I am just so wowed by, and she rocked it, and I'm super inspired. She's a podcaster and influencer, wife of 39 years, and a grandmother to 5 grandchildren. Her core value is to improve the lives of others by uplifting women through awareness, physical activity, and embracing an attitude of gratitude. She believes women attain this confidence in large part by strength training, which she often coincides with cultivation of other forms of strength from within. I love that. And I know we have so much to talk about today. So welcome, Judy.
Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. So I've had the pleasure of kind of getting to know you over the last couple of months since we were introduced through your podcast. But for my listeners who might not know you, can you maybe provide a little background as well as like what led you to working with women in midlife on their fitness, strength, and conditioning?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to share that. So I got to that point in my life where my youngest child was, I'll call him almost self-sufficient at that point. He could drive himself to school. And so I had put my own career in healthcare on hold for, at that point, 20 years, and decided I wanted to get back into something. And this time I decided, instead of worrying or treating people who were already sick, I wanted to get into more of the preventative side of things. And I chose fitness, specifically fitness for women over 40, because I had been learning and coaching myself since I had little kids at home, because I never really found a program or gym that fit that niche. And so I created it and then started my own business, and it's been 14 years.
That's awesome. What are some of the things that you see as the biggest challenges when you're working with women in midlife? I would imagine things like injury and stuff like that come up a lot more. Or what do you see normally? I would even imagine, like, and I know from my own personal experience, like issues with like pelvic floor strength and stuff like that that don't happen earlier in life. And I'm sure you know all about that because you have 4 kids also.
I do know all about that. And that, well, that's a concern. I think one of the biggest things I face is self-confidence issues, which I think women struggle with throughout life. Yeah. And even though we gain, wisdom with maturity, the self-confidence thing is not a given, and it's something we have to work on. And the other big thing that we struggle with is impatience. Like, we want results now, but it's never worked that way. Yeah. Just doesn't, maybe in our 20s, when I've had so many people say this to me, when I was in my 20s and I was getting ready for XYZ, all I had to do was blah, blah, blah for 3 weeks and I was fine. How come I can't do that anymore? And that's, the impatience is a big part of it. And it's frustrating.
Yeah. My body definitely does not respond to my actions as much as it used to, or as quickly as it used to. And I don't know if that's my body or my mind that's being impatient sometimes, but that's definitely a factor. But
I think it's a combination.
Yeah. So what ended up bringing you to the point of wanting to do your own bodybuilding when you were in your 50s?
So by that point, I had been training for a while and learning and educating. And I thought I was getting results with being very patient and consistent. And I just said to my husband, I said, what if I just took it one step further, just one time, if I did a figure competition. So figure is a little bit more muscular than the bikini.
Mm-hmm.
So the anyways, I was a more athletic, it's a more athletic build, and that's what I was. And so I just said, just like one time, and we had a lot of discussions about that, specifically about being 50 some years old and getting on stage half naked, because it's not a thong, but it's a pretty small posing suit. And
What
so
were the
we
concerns or things that came up with that?
well, I mean, if you think about it, like, I didn't want to disrespect my husband. I wanted us both to be comfortable with it.
Sure.
And also just, it's kind of a self prepping for a competition like that is some people think that you just, again, don't eat for 3 weeks and go up there and flex. But in reality, it takes years.
A lot more than
And
that.
so, yeah, much more than that. And it's a sacrifice that you give up some socializing, you give up time with your family, as a mom who serves a lot of people, right? um you're not always available for them. I remember before my first show, my family came home for a holiday and they're like, why is there no food in the refrigerator? And I was like, well, there is food. They're like, yeah, but it's condiments and vegetables, it's boring. And at that point I was really in a taper. But my point is, I forgot what your question was, but it's very selfish. And so with my husband, yeah, one of the concerns was, can we do this? And I always considered us a team, and he did too.
Yeah.
And so could we do this? And actually, after the first one, it was like getting bit by something that you like contagious. Like, I was like, okay, well, now that I've done this, I have to turn pro. So the story went.
And so you did.
I did.
So it was a little bit addictive.
Yeah.
And what would you say were the best parts of it and the worst parts of it? Because I know we've talked a little bit about the ups and downs of it. So just for anybody who's considering it, I know it's crossed my mind on occasion, like, should I just go for it? But I don't know that I have the discipline. I don't know. Or
Well,
the total desire.
yeah.
I'd love to have the body again, but I know the body doesn't last either. It's like,
It's a one
it's
day
so
body.
temporary.
Yeah. So let's talk pros and cons. One of
Yeah.
the pros, I'll start with the pros, is that you find out that you can focus and do something and see it through. Now, you
Yeah.
can't control outcomes, and I always say that you cannot predict the kind of body you're going to get. But when you trust the process, in fact, I'm actually going to do an episode on trusting the process in general. But when you trust the process and know that if you stick to the plan, your chances are, just the fact that you give yourself the confidence to know, like, hey, I can see something through a year
Right.
plan that's very, very focused. The cons are, like I said before, you give up time that you don't get back. Your mind, I used to call it mental aerobics. There's the physical time in the gym, yes. And then there's the time in the kitchen. And then there's the time you spend thinking about, am I doing everything right? How's my
Mm.
posing? You also have to go to posing. You need
Yeah.
instruction on posing. And so it's a lot of time that you don't get back, a lot of time inside your brain that you're actually self-centered about, that, the people that you love don't get you for that time. And you miss out with them, and it's frustrating. They feel like their needs are not getting met. And because it's all about you, and so
Was
that's
it difficult on your marriage during that time, or were you able to do that whole team thing that you wanted to do from the get-go?
we did a team thing, talked a lot about it. I did 16 shows in 4 years. And after the 15th show, I had another show coming in 6 weeks. I just knew. I looked at my husband and I said, that's enough. And he's like, yeah, that's enough. And so, we had to hold tight for 6 more weeks, which is really hard to hold a body tight for that long. I'd never really had that big a gap between shows either. That last show was not a good show. the second to the last show is my best show ever. And I think that was a combination of the mindset and just trying to hold on to something that your body can't hold on to it that long.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I don't think most people realize how short term that everything you work for lasts, and that's probably why I won't
yeah.
do it. Because I'd
Well,
rather,
it's
rather
fine to be
maintain the
show ready.
realistic.
Here's what I say, because I have trained a number of women who want also to do the same thing. And although it's really not the focus of my training business anymore, but I always had a small percentage, like 20-30% of my clients that would do that. But anyways, where was I going with that? The focus. Oh, I would have people say to me, well, I want you to train me so I look like I could compete, but I don't really want to compete. And I was always saying, no, you don't seem to understand. I could train you so that you maybe look 4 months out, but you can't hold on to that body and remain healthy,
Yeah.
not physically, not emotionally, not mentally.
And I
And
really
there's,
wish more people knew that, which is kind of why I was looking for you to drive that home, because I think the idea that that exists as a norm is it plays into so many of the eating disorders, the body dysmorphia, like all this stuff that, makes us feel so not enough as women when, our weight fluctuates a few pounds in one direction or another, or any of that other stuff that comes up that eats at our self-confidence, like you were saying.
yeah, yeah. And the other, one of the other cons is that getting back into a moderate lifestyle and just trying to hold on to a fit body, but not a super lean body. First of all, you have to retrain your brain as to
Yeah.
what you want and how to hold on to it. And then to be able to not be obsessive about the food part is very hard. For example, I was always taught after your show, go out and eat whatever you want, doesn't matter, and that became my mentality. Like we would have to go out, we'd have to find a restaurant that was open at 10 o'clock at night so I could eat whatever I wanted, which is ridiculous now that I think back on it, but it was like, that's what we're supposed to do. I thought I deserved that, which really, and deserved to go to bed with a stomach ache. What's the benefit there,
Yeah. So how did you kind of get back into a healthy mindset after one that was a little off in one way or another from doing that for so long?
That has been a very long work in progress because for the longest time, I didn't realize I was still harboring that mindset. I was harboring self criticism, literally self hate with the body dysmorphia because I felt that. And I would get, not that that words of affirmation are that important from other people, but I would get compliments constantly. And I would be like, they don't understand. This is not the body I want, because it wasn't close to the competition body. And I knew it couldn't be the exact competition body, but I wanted to hold on to something a little bit more close to it. And whenever I thought I was practicing moderation and balance, if I didn't like what I saw in the mirror, I would go back to strict weighing and measuring, and then couldn't understand why I was so hungry because I was really cutting down my energy intake a little too much because I thought, well, I could handle it and then I'll just eat a little more later. And it took a long time to realize that that was disordered behavior. Now I will just, it's not that I never did anything like not eat. I never did anything like purge, but I had some meals that I perceived to be too much, and so in my brain, that's just as much a disordered eating style as some of the other ones. No, it's not a mental illness, and because what I would be is like, you're not in control. And the whole thing was to be in control and realizing you can't control outcomes, you can control habits. And so I had to really recultivate healthier habits where
Yeah.
I don't have to know down to the gram how much protein I'm eating,
Yeah.
for
And the only
example.
way I've ever found to make habits stick or better is through the thoughts that are behind them.
Yes.
Like I've never been able to be like, I'm just going to do things this way now. And then all of a sudden I'm just doing things in a whole new way. It's always the thoughts that are behind it, which, definitely comes up a lot in the work that I do. But the body is we put so much importance on the body, and it is important for so many reasons that we're usually not putting the emphasis on. But because like the body is it's our first chakra, it's the foundation for everything else that we do in our life, and then we have all these like negative thoughts about it that really eat away at the way that it can support us and everything that we want to do in our life. And I think that's kind of the big thing that a lot of people aren't thinking about when they're just trying to like lose 5 pounds, or they're feeling like they're not enough or whatever, is like where that's all coming from. But yeah, so healthier habits and getting those instilled. I think when we talked, you said you had like given up like, a lot of the statistics and stuff with your weight and things like the scale and stuff like that. Was that hard for
Yeah,
you?
and it was, I will say it was hard because it was like quitting smoking. Like I would quit for a while and then go back to weighing and measuring and stepping on the scale and back and forth. But I want to actually speak to your point about, you said it differently, but the way that I say it is the main problem centers in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really important thing to go back and remember, because it's our perception of our situation more than anything, the story we tell ourselves more than anything. And I had to rewrite the story. Like, no, there are still things I measure. Like if I make pasta for my husband and I myself, I do measure out the dry pasta and then it's fine. Or I'll say to him, do we make extra for lunches? Do you want some? How much do you want? And that's, certain things, but not obsessive. Like I couldn't put grape tomato in my mouth if I wanted to. Like that would have been a sin before, versus now it's much more, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah. If you're hungry a little bit early and you eat an apple before your lunch, you're not going to go to hell.
Nope. Most people choose much less healthy things than an apple to eat when they're having a snack attack. That's for sure. So when it comes to fitness, I know I've loved fitness and embraced it a lot over the last probably 8 to 10 years. Before that, it was a lot more sporadic for me. What do you think is the best way in, midlife to get into a routine that really complements and supports you instead of beating you up, and helps you to, transition in a lovely way into later years and still be connected with fitness?
What I would say is find your community. You have to find a community, a tribe, whatever that you identify with, whether it's an online community or an in-person community, or it's your three best girlfriends, whatever, or your fitness friends that you maybe meet and you're like, all right, we're going to do this together. But I think when you have a community to support you and you support them, right? You're improving their life, they're improving yours. You're not going to miss meeting them at the end of the driveway, say for your walk, because they're depending on you and you're
Yeah.
depending on them. And I think we cannot understate the importance of a community.
Yeah, absolutely. And the accountability of the
Yes.
community for
Yes.
sure. That
Yep.
was always big with me when I was first getting back into it, was making sure there was community and support and kind of a checking in sort of process so that I would show up and do what I said I was going to do. Because when I was only accountable to myself, I didn't have that same commitment level. And that's something that I've gotten accountable to. I can be accountable to myself now, but that was a muscle in and of itself that needed to be grown and flexed in order to develop.
Another story, right? In our brain that we need
Yeah.
to write in a successful way.
Yeah, because for all those years that I wasn't exercising, there were all those stories of why not. Oh, I don't have time to go to the gym because the kids are too small, or there's not a good childcare program, or oh, I'll be okay. I'll just take a walk, or, whatever. And those stories had to be rewritten also, because, our mind is always showing up to do what it thinks we want it to do. And so when we tell it those things, it's going to find a way for us not to be able to do the workout or whatever else. And it thinks it's looking out for us. But as we grow in consciousness and age and everything else, we can show up differently for ourselves and realize, what's serving us and what's not. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I love that point. We are what we tell our brain. Our brains are so literal, right?
Very much so. It's amazing the things that I've seen people manifest when they thought that they were just, saying something, I don't know, like, oh, this job's killing me or, whatever. And then all of a sudden, like they're on death's doorstep or whatever, or, I'd rather die than ever do that again or whatever. And
Yeah.
maybe they're talking about a relationship or something. And instead they just find themselves alone and not in another relationship because their brain's thinking, well, you relate that with, getting really sick or dying or whatever else. So we're going to make sure that you stay alone where we can at least keep you alive. So,
Yeah.
it tries. It's just a little bit more rudimentary than we need it to be.
I'm laughing because I have had some clients to, in fact, refer to coming to my studio as a torture chamber. And I just said, we will not talk that way at all. One was well, I won't say it, but one is not a client anymore. And the other one is a client and doesn't speak that way anymore, which I'm so happy for.
Just
But
makes it, I mean, it makes a difference for her, I'm sure. But
and for the
it's an
people
unconscious
around,
thing,
right?
like the way that we compare things that we want to be doing in our life to things that are unappealing. And it makes it so much harder to make progress like that. That's for sure.
Yeah. And we
Oh,
cannot be our own worst enemy.
yeah. So on that positive side of things, how do you feel that your relationship with fitness has helped you to become more of who you're intended to be in this world? With a show called Becoming More Me, I'm always curious about that, how it's helped you to become more you.
That is such a great question. And for me, I think the answer is easy. I think I was called to actually help other midlife women through through this whole complete package of not just physical activity, but believing in themselves and using their mind and using gratitude. And the name of my company is Grateful Fitness. And I really think that that's what I'm supposed to do. I came from healthcare where I worked in a hospital, and that was fine pre-children and even up until 3 children. And then I left. And when I after being home for several years, I'm like, this is not what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to share how I figured out how to do the second half of life thing with health and fitness as our goal, not number on the scale. And yes, we want to be attractive, but it's not the number one goal. That's a beautiful second, or what do I want to say? A beautiful byproduct.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. How did your involvement with health and fitness affect your kids when they were growing up?
My kids always knew that we exercised. So we started out with a small home gym in our first house. It was just dumbbells under the couch that I hauled out, during nap time, whatever. And then, in our second house, we went ahead when we finished our lower level, put in a gym, and they knew, like, days off of school, they would see me do it, but they also knew that I was up before they were. So when I would go to wake them up, I would be sweaty, having completed a workout, been in workout clothes. All right, come on, this is what we're doing. And they just knew this was a way of life. And my husband, same thing. He would get home from work and he would do his fitness thing before he would eat dinner. And then we would eat dinner as a family after that. Or of course, when they got into sports, then that was kind of funny. Eating dinner as a family, is a challenge when you have 4 kids in sports, but we got through it. But still, we did it as often as we could. But my point is, they grew up with that being a way of life. This is what you do, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do they maintain healthy lifestyles and good fitness routines into adulthood?
They're working at it. I think some of them are in a very hard time of life right now, but the activity in physical activity is important to all of them, which I'm very
That's
grateful
awesome.
for. And one of the things that worried me, I did not get into bodybuilding until after everyone had left the house. But before that, I was always very careful. They may have seen me weigh and measure food, but I was always very careful to this is healthy. This is not, we're not trying to be skinny minis. We're trying to be fit, you
Right.
know, very careful. And hopefully I left a good impression on them. They seem to be all well adjusted. And, I'm a big advocate of health at every size. So, I do not make comments on anybody's size.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's smart. That's good that they had a good role model like you to show them being active and what that looks like and everything else. I think that's so necessary in this day and age. And there's so many families where it's not present, unfortunately. So those good role models are awesome for our children. That's for sure. I love that my
I
children
think
get to
it's
see working
important.
out and they get to see that it's a priority, and
Yeah,
sometimes that does mean like, no, I'm not going to be able to do that with you right now, but in 20 minutes when I'm done, then, we'll do it. But they know
exactly.
that
Yeah.
that's my time and that's important to me and to my husband. And I love it when they jump in with us. I mean, my kids are younger than yours, of course. And it's fun when my 5-year-old will come down and start, picking up the 2-pound dumbbells and doing some presses next to us or something like that. And getting to see that like they think it's cool, they want to do it, they want to grow and be strong and that kind of thing. I love that.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is sweet. Yeah.
Yeah. But when it comes to midlife, like I said before, I know like my metabolism seems to have slowed down a bit. Are there any like good tips or tricks for getting things to rev up or for finding more muscle in midlife that are different
Absolutely.
from when we were younger?
Well, I don't know what you did when you were younger, but I feel that I cannot overstate this enough. The most important thing that we can do, really beginning at around age 30, but really beginning at even in adolescence and older and continuing throughout life, is to resistance train. And the reason we need to do that is we need to, if you don't maintain your strength, it will go.
Yep.
And you probably already know this because you've been in fitness, but beginning at around age 30, we naturally will lose muscle mass, but unfortunately, we will not naturally lose fat mass. And so the bodies begin to change. That's natural aging. But if there's a fountain of youth, it's over where the weight benches are. It is resistance and strength training. And so many women, if I could keep going, please cut me off if you want, but I always get but I get too bulky line from women. And I know it can be very scary to think that you can get bulky, but as someone who tried to get bulky,
It's very, very hard,
it's
actually.
really hard. Men have this hormone called testosterone in large quantities that we have in teeny tiny quantities, but it allows them. I mean, we have to do way much more work than they do to build muscle,
Yep.
basically, on that. And then the other thing that people have up until they stop growing, up until maybe early 20s, maybe for women, it might be late teens, is growth hormone, which also helps you respond to staying strong. And we don't make growth hormone anymore. So we are naturally getting weaker if we're doing nothing. And if we're only doing cardio, we're going to have a great, big, strong heart. I don't want to say big, but we're going to have a strong heart. But we can also not have a strong rest of the body. Now, it depends on, maybe some of the muscles used with that might be efficient, but they're overall, we're not going to be stronger. In fact, I had 2 friends who were, I would call them cardio bunnies, where they were cardio, 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 6 days a week, hours on end, hours and hours and hours. They both fell down on the same day. One fractured a foot and an arm, and the other one fractured an arm.
Oh my goodness.
And as you know, if we don't work to strength train, we're going to have weaker bones because bones are part of that. And so not only did they not have enough muscle around those bones, they actually had weak bones because they were overdoing the cardio and literally under eating. And so I just like to make that point to everyone that strength training is your fountain of youth. It is the number one. It should be your priority as part of your exercise routine. Now, it should not be the whole thing either, but it should be the priority.
Yeah, it's my favorite. So, I mean, I would strength train every day, but I know I need to get some cardio in there and everything else. Is there a balance that you like as far as like how much you resistance train and how much you do things like cardio or mobility or things like that?
Yeah, well, mobility, the way that I train my clients and myself, mobility is the first part of our strength training workout. So I go take my clients and myself through a full 6 phase warm up without fail.
Nice.
And that is something I have learned and become certified in, which I find to be extremely important because
Yeah.
you can, it's not, I love this quote. I didn't make up this quote, but this is a quote from a physical therapist who I trained under. It's not the load that breaks you down, it's the load you're not prepared for. So if you don't prepare your body for lifting, you are setting yourself up for injury.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate my cool downs and my warm ups way more since I've entered my 40s than I used to before. Not that I
Yeah.
didn't do them, but I might have rushed them. They might have been a little shorter. Now it's like I can definitely appreciate and get into a really good warm up and some good mobility work and all that and see the value and the difference when I do
Yeah.
that.
So for part two to your question, if you'd like me to answer it, I think you were
Yeah.
talking about balance between resistance training. So resistance training, I like to be realistic. Otherwise, people are going to be like, well, I can't do that. So here's what I will tell people. Strength train 2 to 5 days per week based on what your schedule will allow and what your mental capacity will allow. But there are 6 movement patterns and they each need to be trained twice per week. Am I allowed to mention them?
Yeah, please.
So they are pull moves, things like rows and curls, push moves, things like this chest press,
Mhm.
tricep things, shoulder work. Then there are squats for the lower body, lunges, which are any single-sided lower body action because we really want to load our weak side separate from our strong side. And there are hinges, which are any kind of deadlift
Yeah.
or hip hinges, hip thrusts.
Yeah.
And then there's something called carries, which is actually carrying yourself in space, like a plank is a carry, or carrying something weighted in one form or another. And those 6 movement patterns need to be trained twice per week. Whether you do it in 2 workouts, 3, 4, or 5 workouts is up to you. And you can find someone to help you write it, with the programming for that. And then as far as cardio goes, I follow the American Heart Association guidelines, which says 150 minutes of aerobic activity per week. Now,
Yeah.
but no less than 10 minutes at a time, because I know a lot of people like to break it up. However, if you are doing, so that's in that moderate heart rate zone. If you look at the heart rate charts where the aerobic zone,
Yeah.
if you're getting into some high intensity cardio sessions, such as sprints or HIIT, the minutes can come down to 120. And I just read that recently from the people that I train under. It's a pain-free performance system under Dr. John Russin. These are all PhDs who I respect immensely. So
That's
there you
awesome and so
go. Yep.
helpful. And I'm doing all of those things. So that makes me feel really good.
Yes, I'm going to applaud you. Awesome.
That's great. I had a question come to mind, and now I'm having a hard time remembering what it was. Oh, I know you said with the time, like, obviously what accommodates somebody's schedule. I always hate to see, like you said, like your friends that are like doing cardio like hours and hours and hours, or just like working out the whole day, thinking that's necessary. And I always see these things these days that say like as we're getting older, we need to work out like almost like less. And I'm just wondering, like, if you put the mental health aside and all the other stuff, like what's optimal time wise for a body to maintain or make progress?
I don't think you can put a time on it. I really don't think it's a time
More
question.
of like accomplishing the exercises.
Yeah, you're gonna train those body movements. Sometimes I say body parts, but they're movements
Mhm.
twice per week. You're going to get a full mobility warm up in. The warm up's going to take from 10 to 14 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's just a fact. So if you want to break that up into sessions that are shorter, and maybe you're just doing one day you're doing push and pull, another day you're doing squat and hinge, then you have another push pull day, maybe another squat hinge day, maybe you're doing carries, on another day with lunges or carries with squats. You can break it up. I mean, the combinations are infinite, and that's where I get into, like, I love programming.
Yeah.
My husband's like, what are you doing over there? He'll be watching sports, and I've got my iPad out, and I'm like, I'm doing programming. He's like, again? I'm like, oh yeah, again. Yeah, it's fun.
Do you create individual programs for each of your clients?
So I do small group personal training, and we create programs roughly monthly. It's not exactly monthly. They're 3-ish, no more than 5 weeks, because everyone gets so bored. But what within those programs, I have modifications and progressions for individuals, so I'd be like, for this exercise, for example, if you know, maybe you can't squat, maybe you can't deadlift from the floor. So maybe we're going to add blocks. All sorts of just little things. We have people come in, and again, we are in midlife. So we have real life things. I myself had to train myself through 2 carpal tunnel surgeries. And, it's common that women get their knees scoped, and it's like, well, when can I come back? I'm like, well, they'll come back. We actually do the physical therapy as part of the workouts. They'll go to one physical therapy session, and then they're like, why do I have to pay a copay when I can do it with you? And I'm like, yep, we got it done. So
that's nice.
So it is individualized as far as what people need on that day. And they may need something this week, and then they may just, with certain correctives or modification, the next week, they may be ready to do it without the modifications. So
that's awesome. Where can women find out more about what you have to offer if they're interested? Do you have things that you offer for people all over the place, or only in your local area?
No, actually, I do have online memberships, and we meet through Zoom. So people can find me at gratefulfitness.com.
Okay.
Or you can also get there with judyarazoza.com, which you can spell in the show notes.
Yes, absolutely.
I am on Instagram at Judy_Arazoza, and you can message me there or shoot me an email at judy@judyarazoza.com.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so appreciative of everything that you shared with us today, and just grateful to know you. And I will make sure all of that is in the show notes. Are there any final thoughts that you'd like to leave the listeners with as we wrap up?
Well, first of all, I'd love to thank you. We had, for listeners may or may not know this, we just got on the phone and did this little coffee chat. And we had the most delightful conversation. And I just have to say, Teresa, I feel like we're like kindred spirits. I'm a little older than you.
That's okay.
I might be like the future you.
Yeah, maybe.
You might be like the past me, with the number of kids and dogs we have and just our philosophy. It's been a real gift getting to know you, and I want to just thank you so much.
Oh, I feel very much the same, and I look forward to continuing the friendship and the conversations as well. Thank you for being here today on Becoming More Me, and thank you all for listening. Have a great day. Thanks so much for listening. If you loved this episode, please share it with a friend or post on social media and tag me so I can personally connect and thank you. Until next time, keep taking bold and brave action steps towards becoming more of who you want to be in this world. You are capable, you are worthy, and you are enough. Keep shining your light.